The member from Simcoe Grey on a point of order.
Really the same point, Mr. Speaker, but in a more formal way. I seek unanimous consent that up to 5 minutes be allotted to a representative of each of the registered recognized parties to speak in honour of the parliamentary career of the member of Niagara West Glanbrook, and that the member be allotted up to 5 minutes for his reply.
Can we act on you? We've done that.
The member from Simcoe Grey is seeking unanimous consent up to 5 minutes to be allotted to the representative of each recognized party to speak in honour of the parliamentary career of the member from Niagara West Glanbrook, and then the member be allotted 5 minutes to reply. Do we agree? Agreed. The member from Hamilton East Stony Creek.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, normally we stand in tribute because a member of the legislature has passed. Today, we're making a special exception, for the subject of our conversation is still with us. I bet Mr. Stephen Harper is a little jealous today. I don't believe he got a send-off or tribute like this. So, as you know, Tim Hudak and I have adjoining ridings. We represent different parts of my hometown of Stony Creek. Tim was born and raised in the same area he lives in today. He started out in Fort Erie and now lives just half an hour away in Wellandport. Tim actually worked a couple of summers on the border at Fort Erie. Despite his experience on the immigration front line, not once have I heard him talk about building a wall and getting the Americans to pay for it. Tim has been here so long that his riding has had 3 name changes and shaped twice differently. But his constituents over the years obviously have a lot of respect for him because they've sent him here 6 times. What I like about Tim is that he's very approachable and he tries very hard to avoid personal attacks in debates. He's respectful, courteous, and sticks to the issues, which is an admirable quality in this place. Anytime I've attended a cross-party event with Tim, he mentioned my attendance there, which is a courtesy I've always appreciated. He's very sociable, and we saw sides of Tim's humor come out in a very funny way each year at the annual Spring Fling. And I've had a real soft spot for Tim because he named one of his daughters Miller. How can you argue with a guy like that? Tim and I have been political opponents many times, but we also have been good neighbors. From time to time, he asked my advice about dealing with unions. He'd take it, and then he'd do the exact opposite. Every time. Tim was actually one of the first members of this legislature to congratulate me after my election in 2007. He sent a poinsettia to my new office after it opened the month after my election. Steelworkers aren't used to getting poinsettias, but I really appreciated it. It was a thoughtful gesture, the sort of thing you remember in your political career. Some of you might be surprised to hear this, but Tim is both a conservative and conservationist. We worked together as neighbours very successfully a few years ago to protect a natural treasure in the Stony Creek area called the Aramosa Karst. Tim and I introduced a bill to protect the feeder lands from development and to direct what they be used for a conservation area. The government members were rather alarmed to see a steelworker and a PC leader teaming up. They didn't quite know what to make of it and how to handle it, but eventually, possibly in fear, the government heeded our call and leased the lands to the Hamilton Conservation Authority for a nominal fee. Thanks in part to Tim's advocacy, the Aramosa Karst is now protected so that future generations can enjoy it. And again, speaking of Tim as a neighbour, one of the last things he did as an MPP was a small, nonpartisan action to help the people of Niagara and Hamilton regions. He signed his name on a letter I sent to the federal government last month in support of Hamilton and Haldimand steelworkers and pensioners, asking for a public inquiry into the shenanigans at U.S. Steel and Canada, and calling for a comprehensive reform of Canada's bankruptcy and solvency processes, including CCAA. Thank you, Tim. That meant a lot to the thousands of people I represent, and Tim represents. At a provincial level, Mike Harris made Tim a member of cabinet at the tender age of 31. He was younger than half the staffers here. Mr. Harris must have been looking at that map upside down. because he made this young man from one of the southernmost ridings in the province of Ontario Minister of the North. Go figure. Despite his geographic disadvantage, Tim was a respected cabinet minister, and he quickly earned a promotion to Minister of Tourism, Culture and Recreation, which makes more sense to me since he's from near Niagara Falls. During Tim's years as PC leader, I've always questioned his advice he got just before elections. If he ever gets back into politics, I'd be happy to go over his menu there and neighbor and give him proposals to look at. And I'll probably lead you in a, well, maybe not the right way. But now, after a long career in this building, Tim is now entering the working world. He may find out someday what it's like to have a bad boss. But he doesn't have to worry just yet, because he's still the boss. Tim, you have had haven't had a real job in 21 years since your days at Walmart. Another good union company. The world's going to be tough out there, buddy, but I'm confident you'll be up for the task. By the way, Tim told me that one of the first things he's going to do in his new position is to create 100,000 jobs in the real estate business. I'm sure that was part of your interview pitch, but thanks, Tim. On behalf of the Ontario New Democratic Caucus, I want to thank Tim Hudak for his many years of public service as a member of the provincial parliament. I wish Tim, his wife Deb, and their two young daughters, Maitland and Miller, a bright future and a happy and successful journey together as Tim embarks on his new chapter of his life. As you heard me say in this house many times, Tim Hudak, wow.
Further tribute, the member, the Chief Government Whip.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to have the privilege of paying tribute to Tim Hudak, because we're allowed to call him that today, not necessarily the member for Niagara West Glanbrook, as he departs from the Ontario Legislature after a distinguished career of some 2 decades of service, not only to the people of Niagara West Glanbrook and its previous names, but also to the people of Ontario as a whole. And I do so not simply as one member to another, but as a personal friend as well. I've had the opportunity to work with Tim as one of the members from the Niagara region. I think you'll find out that certainly in recent years and perhaps previous to that, the Niagara region, the members, no matter what political party they happen to be a member of, tend to work together for things which are good for the Niagara region. And certainly I always had the cooperation and involvement of Tim Hudak in those issues in which I was interested, and I attempted to be helpful to him whenever I could be as well. And our staffs have worked well together as well, and that's something that perhaps the public doesn't know. There's a feeling probably out there when they watch Question Period and other times that those of us on the opposition government hate one another. That is simply not the case. We have different points of view, but there's often a great affection for one another and a thought about the member and the family. I know that Tim's mother and father, Anne-Marie and Pat, were involved in public service, so Tim has followed in their footsteps to a very great extent, and that's where he got his grounding. He's made reference to that on many occasions, the fact that his parents instilled in him the virtues which have served him well in public service, and they certainly were that. Both, by the way, involved in education and in the political scene, and very supportive of Tim over the years in all of his endeavours. Even when they might have disagreed with him from time to time, they were certainly there backing him. Now, he was elected, as I mentioned, at the age of 27, which is far too young to be elected. And remember, he was elected in a riding that had been Liberal almost forever. Ray Haggerty had been there for years and years and years as a Liberal member for Niagara South and different names. And Tim got elected in 1995 in the sweep that came in, and he was a true disciple of the common sense revolution, something I didn't agree with, but certainly was quite effective and caught caught the fancy of the people of Ontario as the government was elected not once but twice on that platform. Obviously, Premier Harris saw in him his youthful enthusiasm, his interest, and his background, his educational background, in particular in the field of economics, and decided to appoint him as a parliamentary assistant first, and then, of course, at the various cabinet positions where he served the government exceedingly well, despite what Bill Murdoch said one day in the House about it. But Bill said that about many people over the years, so don't worry about that. Tim could have chosen another career path, but he chose public service, and public service doesn't pay the most money, and it can be very onerous, and you're subject to scrutiny at all times. He could have chosen another path, but he chose public service, and I think the people of his riding were pleased that he did so. Now, he took on one of the most onerous positions there is. One of the toughest positions is leader of the official opposition in the Ontario legislature or anywhere else. You have to travel the province. He was on a Winnebago at one time, by the way, traveling the province, back and forth, going to bun feeds here and there, speaking to 15 people at a time. But eventually, you hope that you have the opportunity to change sides, and Tim strived for that very much. Did not achieve that in his lifetime, but put forward an alternative for the people of Ontario that I think they appreciate very much. He made a lot of sacrifices. I mean, his wife, Deb Hutton, would tell you that. The girls, Miller and Maitland, would tell you that they would like to have seen Dad at home or husband at home more often, but he did the best he could to maintain that connection with family, at the same time be serving in the public. One thing you knew about Tim was he's not dead. It sounds, when you say that, it sounds as though the person dead. One thing you knew about Tim, he always knew where he stood. He didn't pander to the issue of the day. He didn't pander to individual interest groups and so on. He had a position he set out, and I disagreed with the position, but I admired the fact that he enunciated it, that he provided to the people of Ontario, and that he stuck by that particular position. That's hard to do in politics, and Tim did that. And I'm going to mention quickly 3 local instances where he took a stand which was very brave to take. In the election campaign, the last provincial election campaign, one of the issues was GO Transit to Niagara. And 2 of the parties, the NDP and the Liberals, said, yeah, we're for GO Transit Niagara, we'll bring it there. And they asked him, and he said, and he's from Niagara, and he knows it's a popular position, but said, I wouldn't contemplate this until the budget is balanced. That's a principled position he took, which, with some people was not a popular position, but he took that position. He's a very strong advocate for West Lincoln Memorial Hospital. One of the budgets, they asked him in the budget lockup, but Tim, you're calling for restraint and so on, so how can you possibly ever be critical of the fact that they wouldn't be funding West Lincoln Memorial Hospital in Grimsby? And he said, no, this is my position. Even though I know and the people know, and subsequent to that, he was a strong advocate and started petitions for the hospital. In that particular instance, when asked by the press, he was very honest and up front with it. Another instance I saw, we met with a local organization, a service organization, public service organization, and the easy thing to do when you're sitting there is to take the side of the organization against the government, which is obviously not providing enough money. And Tim may be thinking in his mind where this was. But I remember him sitting there, and they asked questions about it, and he asked questions of them, well, how can you perhaps run your organization better so you don't need more money? Words to that effect. And I admired that, because that's very difficult to do. You always want to take up the criticism they might have of government. So you knew where he stood. He may have played left wing and centre in hockey, but by God, he was a right winger when it came to politics all the way. So I was scrawling these notes down, because you always try to do these notes at the appropriate time, and you want to get into many different things, but I don't think that I should get into too many things, other than the fact that being from Niagara, he likes chicken wings. Everybody has to know that. Tim likes chicken wings. He likes and goes to the games of the Buffalo Bills. By the way, he's also a Boston Bruins fan, despite the fact that it's easy to say you're a Leafs fan because politically that's good. But he's a Boston Bruins fan, and he certainly could have done a lot of things differently in that regard, but he didn't. Tim's a well-rounded person. We always see him as he's the political guy, but Tim had other interests out there as well, and a very likable individual. Always had a smile on his face when he was in politics, which we liked very much. And you watched as he was able to walk around the House and interact with many people. Tim took controversial stands. He didn't flip-flop on things, even though some days I would like him to have flip-flop on things. He didn't do that. And what you see is what you got when you saw Tim Hudak on the platform or in this House. Now, he survived, despite when a government's defeated, it's hard to survive. In 2003, the government was defeated. Tim held on to his seat. Yeah, people can say it's a safe Tory seat, for instance, but when the government's being defeated and you hang on, that speaks well of the member's attachment to his constituency, and Tim was able to do that exceedingly well. So, Tim, we will miss you in this House. I will miss you in this House. I'll miss you as a colleague in an adjacent riding. We know that now you can, well, I guess you're past that stage. He was once a WWF fan. Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Leaping Lanny Poffo, Roddy Piper and the gang, and he used to have the posters in his room for all of them. And I won't reveal that to some people that perhaps it's not really real, but it was. It's like talking to Santa Claus to a kid, and here I'm telling Tim it's not real. And I think he certainly knew that. Tim was a friend. We got along well. He will be missed, but he'll still be around. He won't be a person who's going to disappear into the background. And I know, again, that Deb will miss him, will not miss him being in this House for a lot of reasons, particularly because of being close at home, and Miller and Maitland will, and he's very, very dedicated to his family, so I know he'll appreciate that opportunity. Tim, all of us in this House, regardless of our political affiliation background, wish you well. You have been a friend in the past. You'll be a friend for a lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you. Further tribute, the member from Nepean Carleton.
Thank you very much, Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise on behalf of Patrick Brown, the Progressive Conservative Caucus, and the entire Progressive Conservative Party in tribute to Tim Hudak. Yesterday was his anniversary of becoming the Progressive Conservative leader in the House, and today he'll give his final speech as a member of Provincial Parliament for Niagara West Glanbrook, a riding which he has held for 21 years. A colleague, a confidant, at times a co-conspirator, and even one time a co-defendant. It's a good thing Kathy's not here today, but we were instant friends. I first met Tim at the Ottawa Convention Centre when he was a cabinet minister under Ernie Eves, and he was about to approve funding for a new state-of-the-art building. Bob Chiarelli was mayor then, Norm Sterling was the regional minister, and our dear friend, now departed, Maurice Bélanger, was the federal minister. I remember because Tim came up to me, my husband was actually the Progressive Conservative candidate in Ottawa Centre, and Tim actually said to me, you should be the candidate instead. Anyway, I get the next laugh because I get elected, husband doesn't, but then my husband gets the final laugh because he's actually been on Tim Hudak's talk show. So, just a reminder, I'm waiting for the invitation. Many years later, it was profound for me because as the local member of Provincial Parliament, we held our first convention at the Ottawa Convention Centre under Tim Hudak's leadership. Years later, I would get elected from that time we spoke. And I remember the day so vividly when I first entered the Progressive Conservative Caucus. John Tory, in my mind, was a legend, and Elizabeth Whitmer, Jim Wilson, Bob Runciman, and Norm Sterling all had played prominent roles, Frank Cleese, in progressive Conservative governments, including Tim Hudak. But he was the first to rise and to greet myself and Christine Elliott as we walked in the room. And we became friends from that day forward. In fact, my office used to be beside the old whip's office, and because of that, there was a nice staffer there, Julie Kwasinski, and she came over to me and she said, "You'll get to know Tim Hudak. He was well brought up." And after knowing him for a decade and having built a relationship with himself and his family, I can tell you, honestly, that his mother, Anne Marie, and his father, Pat, did a stand-up job. I want to talk a few minutes about his accomplishments because as a cabinet minister, you do make achievements that you're very proud of. And at his time, he spent in 3 different economic portfolios. He did a lot to make sure that mining in Ontario was #1 in Canada. He did a lot after the terrorist attacks on September 11th to encourage the tourism community here in the province to be resolute and to ensure that we were open for business. And I think we can all single-handedly credit him for the VQA and his instrumental lead in ensuring that we have more wine available from wineries in Niagara. Tim and I don't often agree on wine. As many of you know, I replaced a very shy and retiring young man named John Baird when he became a federal minister. So one of the first times I invited Tim Hudak to my riding, we went to Cedar Hill Golf and Country Club, which used to be owned by Bob Schrawley's family, FYI. And we sat down and Tim said, well, let's have a glass of wine with dinner. And me, totally tone deaf to the fact that he loves VQA wine, I ordered a Wolf Blass. And he looks at me and he said, did Baird put you up to that? So apparently Baird would do this all the time. So not to be outdone by me, my husband then, we were in a by-election in Ottawa, West Nepean, and my husband goes out to the LCBO in Nepean, and as many people know, Nepean, Ottawa, West Nepean, Nepean, Carleton, very close. My husband's in there, and he's buying red wine for after the by-election. And he's got this basket, and Tim Hudak looks down at it, and he said, Australian pluck? So very, very upset. But I want to point out a few things about Tim's character that I don't think the broader public actually knows about. As Progressive Conservative leader, he called us each and every Christmas. We appreciated that, but not as much as how much we appreciated when our staff would receive personal notes from him after they helped him either at Queen's Park or more likely at our constituency offices. The other thing that's very special to me is that he knows all of our spouses and our children's names. As leader, Tim Hudak made the Progressive Conservative Party family-friendly. Miller's Kids Conventions became the highlight of the year for Tories, but more importantly, it became the focus for our children, young Progressive Conservatives in training. And it was actually a very favorite thing for my daughter, who is growing up in her mother's footsteps, I can assure you. In 2009, some members of this House remember that we staged a sit-in in opposition to the harmonized sales tax, with Randy Hillier and Bill Murdoch displaying grave disorder, much to the chagrin of the previous speaker. But what most people don't know is while we staged those sit-ins, we actually were in the West Lobby. And I don't know if I'm betraying any caucus confidences here, but Tim Hudak sat there and he sang with John Yakubuski Johnny Cash songs. That's something you try to forget, but you just can't. As leader, he ran on a clear and unabashed conservative message. It was bold and it was risky, but it was conservative. And since he's left as leader, I often hear from people, and some of you may hear it too, I like this new Tim Hudak, or why wasn't that Tim Hudak on the campaign trail? Well, he is that Tim Hudak, and he's always been that Tim Hudak, and it's the Tim Hudak that I like. And it's the Tim Hudak that would show up here all the time before he was leader, even when he was leader, and talk about what happens in Niagara West Glanbrook, and we all knew it so well. Some of the issues that he raised daily in the House with dogged determination were always tourism. He talked a lot about the Niagara Escarpment. He talked about gypsy moss, which, for the record, he doesn't like, and he talked about fruit growers, VQA wine, the Fort Erie Hospital, and many other things. He was such an expert at so many of these topics that after I listened to him and watched him, I had, I don't know if it was the fortune or misfortune in 2011 to be sent down as the surrogate while he was touring the province to do debates for him. I was scheduled to do a few, but I think once they realized that I knew the issues just as well as Hudak, that they were all cancelled. So I'm kind of grateful that I sat in on all those speeches. But the 2011 election was also a very tough one for him. He spent many weeks with his wife, Deb, at Sick Kids Hospital with his daughter, Miller. We would text each other. I remember July 1st, because it's a very busy day in Ottawa, as you can probably imagine, texting with him at the hospital. We've shared many good, bad, happy, and sad times. Most of you probably haven't realized this, but in 1 month in 2014, as he led our party, his daughter Maitland was born. He lost his close friend, Jim Flaherty, who was the husband of his seatmate, deputy leader, colleague, and our friend. And he and I were served notice of a lawsuit. We went into the 2014 election 1 month later. But this is typical of the type of load that Tim can carry while doing it with a smile and greeting you with warmth. He's a thoughtful, a considerate colleague and a friend. And I do have a few stories. This is actually a lovely one. I tweeted out that I was in Niagara with my mother, who's from Nova Scotia, and that we were staying at a hotel. And Tim's staff found out from my staff where we were staying, and when we checked in, there was some Niagara wine and some peaches. And I just thought, well brought up. You could go to his home anytime. Debbie's a wonderful cook, and she would often cook for and bake for the press gallery each year. But getting invited to one of their Super Bowl parties was actually quite super, and many, many good times. I couldn't go visit my family in Nova Scotia, and I did this summer without him demanding either to bring back lobster or beer, or I brought him some Nova Scotia wine. We'll see how that ticks. I don't think it'll be that good, but we'll see. And this year, he spoke at my 10-year anniversary party, which was quite difficult for me. We talked about our friendship, he talked about our children, who are quite good friends, and we talked about our politics. He talked about my loyalty, and we were both quite emotional, and I'm going to tell you why. After 2014, the election defeat was hardest on him. But I was struggling with depression, and he would sit with me either here at Queen's Park or on the phone when I was at home, and he would try to boost me up. Sometimes that was daily. That's the Tim Hudak that I know, well brought up, always deserving of my loyalty, always a friend. Later this past summer, his riding association in Niagara, West Glanbrook hosted a tribute for Tim's 21 years in politics. And they asked me to appear by video, and I happily agreed, and I shared many of what I've shared with you today. But I was asked for 5 words to describe him. So I'm going to be honest. I was tempted to go with 100,000 job cuts. But I opted instead to go with the best premier Ontario never had. It should come as no surprise that when he told me he was leaving politics this summer, I cried for 2 hours in my constituency. He and his former staff had to calm me down. So did my husband. So did my staff. And I know this isn't the pit bull lipstick that you guys are used to. He's a pretty special friend to me. Tim Hudak has, I'm going to have to wipe my eyes, I can't see. Tim Hudak has been and always will be more than an MPP to many in this room. He'll be more than a party leader, and he's more than a Conservative. And I know history is going to reflect that. In the end, this might be the end of an era, but for all of us here, this is not the end of a friendship. It's not the end of Tim Hudak. And I want to wish him, Maitland Miller, and his beautiful wife, Deb, fun in retirement as they move on to the next chapter. Thank you.
Member from Niagara West.
It's 5 minutes for rebuttal, Mr. Speaker. Well, thank you, Speaker. It's truly a special honor to speak at this time and moment traditionally used for dead people. It's like being able to rebut at your own funeral. And to quote one of my favorite group of philosophers, as Monty Python once said, I'm not quite dead yet. So let me have a few last words, Speaker and colleagues, before I walk out the doors one last time. So first, thanks so much to my esteemed colleagues for the very kind and generous words. It's fair to say that this level of politicians are skilled in the art of plausible exaggeration. So I thank them for their generosity and those memories. Lisa, you touched my heart. I try to say to myself, yeah, I wouldn't get emotional, Speaker. I mean, I have worked hard to cultivate that hard-ass image over 21 years in this business. And it's just bad for the brand. I'll say to Lisa Baxter, some very wonderful stories. We all have highs and lows in our work and in our lives, and you know who your true friends are, when they're not just for the good times, but for the tough times. So thank you, Lisa. And Jim, as a veteran and a friend, and always a dear friend of my wife, Debbie, as well, as a Dean of the Legislature, your veteran comments and perspective and the way you look at my career meant a lot to me personally, so thank you. And Paul, for your irascible sense of humor. It's why you're one of my favorite New Democrats. I won't name the other one. I'll just tell you today. And I'm sorry to say this, Norm, but now he's passed you as my second favorite Miller on the planet. Thank you very much. So joking aside, Speaker, I'm going to miss this place and people an awful lot. It's been 21 years. I've served my sentence, hopefully getting sprung for good behavior. But honest to God, I wouldn't change a minute of it for anything in the world. It has been incredible. Met Debbie here through this business. That's the best part. When we first started, actually, I was in the far, my desk wasn't even there anymore. It was so far back in that corner. And I don't think she knew me there. She figured I was Tim, Tom, or Bart, for those of us around back in '95. One of those new Niagara guys. But I had her in my targets, and I won that day, and that's the best thing about this business. If he was with Miller today, I couldn't be here. And then Miller and Maitland came about as part of that love. That's awesome. This is the toughest part, Speaker. Deep breath. Nothing would make this dad more proud than to see one of them standing in his place someday as an MPP. And giving back in public service, but you know, kids, and with Debbie and I both being somewhat on the right, I've got no doubt that they'll both be wearing plaid-wearing, Chuck Taylor-sporting New Democrats someday if they join this. So it'll be worth the trade-off. And I say to you, Speaker, and to the clerk and the staff here at Legislative Assembly, I want to thank you. It is, I can't imagine working with so many politicians, 170 less characters at a time. That ain't easy. And all of the staff here, Speaker, their professionalism, their kindness, their love for this great institution is incredible. Always so kind to my girls as they scampered about in the hallways and made a little mischief. They do an incredible job. And I want to thank them for everything they've done to make my experience so enjoyable. Proud to see so many of my team here, too, the stalwart true believers that did incredible dedication and talent who've all gone and done really well in the private sector. So congratulations. Great seeing you guys back here in the Legislative Assembly. So let me use this last few moments I have to give these last words of advice that you remember me by. If you want to sell your home, particularly in the GTA, I can now sell you. But we are a privileged 107. There is nobody else on this entire planet and province who can actually walk into this chamber. We are given by voters a microphone and a desk, and that is such a unique experience. It gives us a great power, an awesome responsibility, but to come in and talk about whatever you want to talk about, to champion whatever cause. So my advice is, use it. You never know when your time is going to be up. To paraphrase one of my favorite presidents, Theodore Roosevelt, this fortunate 107, you'll use that mic to know great enthusiasms, great devotions, to spend yourself in a worthy cause. Who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. Give people clear choices. Don't be tepid, don't be middling, don't bite your tongue. You don't know when the buzzer goes off. Play hard and play fair. Over the past 2 decades in Ontario politics, over what I've said, how I've conducted myself, I've been a lot of different things to a lot of different people, Speaker. An MPP, I was the kid, now I'm the veteran. The minister, leader, robot, frat boy, Bay Street stooge. I'll tell you a quick story, Speaker. Can I? Thank you. Remember the ads, Working Families ads, where I went in front of a group of sort of the old school Bay Street guys in the oak panel chamber? So we were doing their effective ads. The guy actually looked like me a lot, except was younger, broader shoulders, better shape, so it was kind of flattering. But during candidate training, we had one of our PC candidates that said, yeah, I know those ads aren't true, but Tim never should have gone into that meeting in the first place. The radio guy has been fun too, and some of my friends here in the media are kind enough to come here today for my last words. It is so much fun to be in the media because you can speak with full authority on topics you know nothing about, and there's no consequences whatsoever. So just for the fun of it, because my sense of humor, but I've been a lot of things. The last one I would never want to be, and I don't think I've ever been, is Abe Simpson. What I mean by that? The hell in the handbasket guy. I've been here a while, and what I want to say as I conclude, Speaker, is there's always this pining nostalgia for the old days. We'll complain that things get more cynical or more polarized, the adversarial dialogue. But when you take 21 years and you take a step back, everything gets better. It really does. We can debate what's in front of our noses, the ebbs and flows. I've never seen more people involved, more people that have access to information that relates to what we do here, more people active. It's true we'll have conflict, and when debate gets tough and clear, it's a good thing. But there's often this false nostalgia for the days when we all got along. And I suspect if you believe that, it's true. Well, it may have been true if you're part of the club. But we forget it was a time when folks drank a lot more. This place was more white, more male. The spouse at home raised a family, absent to the folks who were always here. So I leave here a less cynical person when I arrived. And I arrived pretty bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, wide-eyed, and in awe. And at the end of the day, I remain an optimist. I'm less cynical because I believe the ultimate disinfectant of sunshine reaches nooks and crannies that it didn't reach the day that I arrived. And it could be the sunshine itself, it could be the access to information, it could be the changing, evolving debate around ethics, around fundraising, around lobbying. The point being that people have a lot more information, a lot more right to know about what they pay the bills for, and that's been a good thing. And more importantly, Speaker, there's so many more people involved in the conversation on a daily basis. It's truly incredible when you take a step back and look at that. When I was first elected in 1995, I think I was one of the first members to have a website. I remember my chief of staff at the time, somewhat jokingly, she said that the internet was going to be a passing fad. Those of us that were there from time to time, we get a typewritten letter and something called an envelope with a stamp on it. And today, we are deluged by suggestions from voters, from people, in all kinds of streams, and that's a good thing. It's direct interaction, there's volume, there's quality to it, everyone's in on the conversation. It is two-way, it's timely, it's efficient, it's passionate, and it's very egalitarian. So this place is less a domain of the powerful and more a domain of the people every year. And I hope I played a small part in that, fighting for transparency and accountability, for being controversial enough from time to time to get people's attention and get them talking. And the autism funding that was achieved by a grassroots parent network, even social media, that never would have been possible, Speaker, 20 years ago, even 10. We were having a more genuine, active, and direct connection with those who send us here. And those are all really good things. So I've been unafraid to propose some controversial things from time to time. I have dared greatly, and I've been kicked around by as much as anyone in this chamber, especially by my own PC caucus. But in the end, Speaker, I don't regret a minute of it. To have the honor of sitting on these benches and being a voice for the things people want and believe in, it's never a lost cause for any of us. It is worth the to and fro. You've got a microphone, so use it. 21 years ago, I got this microphone. I've used it well. It's a bit beaten up, it's a bit worn, but it still works. And now, Speaker, I hand it back to the people who put their faith in me these 21 years.
As this wraps up, I want to thank all the members that gave tribute for their wonderful and heartfelt feelings. I want to thank the member from Niagara West Glanbrook for his response. I will give you a quick story. And there was a little get-together yesterday to provide a farewell for staff and members. And we were in the middle of a Board of Internal Economy meeting that I chair, and we took a short break to pay respects. And the member from Dufferin-Caledon and I had a quick word, and I basically said, we need to take the break because we've got to do a visitation. I was quickly corrected, and I said that I will make sure he understands that that was not the case of a visitation. It was my respect for the member. Thank you very much for all that you've done for us. Thank you.